I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
AI is too consequential to be shaped by a few. We need a conversation that's global, inclusive, and grounded in evidence.
Managing the risks and rewards of artificial intelligence. The UN hosts a landmark global dialogue on the fast-moving technology. UN agencies scale up aid efforts in the aftermath of deadly earthquakes in Venezuela.
We're working with both UN officials and like-minded countries and the various branches of our government to try to make the UN a better functioning place.
Shaping the UN of the future, a conversation with Canada's ambassador. Next.
Artificial intelligence is everywhere, quickly touching most parts of everyday life around the globe. And we know it comes with risks. As the United Nations works toward the future, one of the big priorities is AI cooperation and governance for all. The UN is holding its first global dialogue on AI governance in Geneva.
The intelligence of AIs will continue to grow. It sounds like science fiction, but it's a real possibility, and it could change the world in ways that we don't understand yet, and it could change the power dynamics of our planet in ways that require our attention.
UN leaders say the body is uniquely equipped to lead the push for global governance on AI. The dialogue brings together the tech community with governments, academics, and civil society. It seeks to encourage global governance of the fast-developing technology that will focus on safety, human oversight, and equal access to artificial intelligence.
Today, 2.2 billion people have never, ever accessed the internet. So we have this huge digital divide, and those that are not actually connected are going to be left behind when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we got to close that divide.
I think if we don't get this right, then we are likely to see an immense concentration of tech power and wealth in a few zip codes, in a few postal codes. And we are also like to see harms from AI at the individual level and perhaps at the societal and systemic level as well. So it would be a world in which we will struggle to, as humanity, to come to grips with machines which will be in the hands of a very few people in very few geographies.
The basic priorities right now are food assistance in the health sector, medical assistance, shelter for those who have lost their homes and are living on the street, and also essential items that may allow them to live with dignity in the next few days.
UN agencies are working to help earthquake survivors in Venezuela. Parts of the country were rocked by 2 strong quakes. Hundreds of aftershocks have also shaken the area. Search and rescue teams from 27 countries are searching through the rubble. Thousands of buildings have collapsed and the death toll could rise dramatically. At least 12,000 people have been displaced, and in some places, residents whose homes are still standing are afraid to return amidst the aftershocks. Pablo Cabral has more.
This family's house was left standing, but that's not bringing much comfort to those who call it home. The earthquake left cracks, and the still constant aftershocks are a reminder the house could collapse at any moment. So the family moved out, sleeping on mattresses in their yard. For how long, it's anyone's guess.
We feel that all Venezuelans who lost their loved ones are part of our family. It's unbelievable. As a family, we ask and pray to God to get us through the situation. It's really hard.
This is Beroes, a municipality in Yaracuy state whose communities, called Cumbes, were founded centuries ago by runaway slaves. It sits right by the quake's epicenter, but the soil here is firmer than on the coast, and there are no tall buildings, so the material damage is not as bad as in the worst-hit areas, and there was no loss of life, but that doesn't mean it went untouched. This water tank, for example, collapsed, leaving the houses around it without supply. People here are grateful it wasn't worse, but they know the psychological scares won't heal easily.
Honestly, we're frightened here. In this situation, I will never forget this. Never. I've never seen anything like this. First time in my life, at 65 years old, you know?
And the risk remains. As we were visiting a local school, another aftershock hit. We managed to capture a few seconds of people's reactions in the street out front as they felt this new tremor.
It was hard. It hit hard.
This is the moment right after another aftershock here in Venezuela, and well, this is the kind of reaction that we get. We were here and then we just felt the aftershock, and then everybody screamed, left their rooms to be in open air, and well, this is the kind of impact that an earthquake has, and that will certainly last for a long time. This woman was too shocked to talk with us, but her reaction made clear, without words, what she's going through. Then the school principal showed us the cracks in classrooms that are keeping children from returning. Suri Garcia is grateful for the relatively low damage in her area, but says it pains her almost as much to see other Venezuelans suffering.
The quake caught us inside. We ran out. My little girl fell and she hurt her arm. We're sleeping out here now, out of fear. We go inside for a moment to cook our arepas and so on, then come back out here. I don't think we'll go back anytime soon, not until this stops. We don't know. Not until this stops. We don't know how it's going to end.
This shared pain and the solidarity it feels can be seen across the country. Here in the state capital, San Felipe, there are several drop-off points to donations, like this one at the local fire station.
Everyone has thrown themselves into bringing supplies, medicine, non-perishable food, blankets and personal items. All of it has come from people with a spiritual spirit, with enormous warmth. People have come to the mayor's office to show their support for our fellow Venezuelans in this moment of crisis.
Help is arriving, and people are grateful it wasn't worse. But the cracks remain, and so does the fear of the next tremor. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Beroes and San Felipe, Venezuela.
Cuba has been struggling with blackouts amid an energy crisis. For months, the U.S. has severely restricted oil shipments to the island. Cuba accused the U.S. of what it calls unconventional warfare, as it called for a General Assembly debate on U.S. sanctions against the Caribbean nation. Mitch McCann has more.
Havana called on the General Assembly to debate Washington's sanctions on Cuba at the United Nations, a move which the US opposed on Tuesday morning, arguing that every hour spent discussing the matter was wasted money that could instead be used to feed Cuban children or pay Cuban salaries. In the end, the meeting proceeded when 136 nations voted in favour of it and just 9 against. Cuba is gripped by a catastrophic economic crisis. In June, the UN human rights chief said that sanctions were causing widespread harm, describing their effects as both indiscriminate and harsh, saying they are incompatible with international human rights law.
The government of the United States is carrying out against Cuba a multi-dimensional, non-conventional warfare that has already lasted for almost 7 decades now and has become ever more cruel and more ruthless during the last 7 months. Added to this, there is now an energy siege, which is equivalent to a naval blockade, which is an act of war.
The US implemented an economic embargo on Cuba in the 1960s, and the current administration has tightened its grip on the Caribbean nation by introducing new sanctions, restricting oil shipments. Meanwhile, Chinese representatives underscored China's decision to vote in favour of the debate taking place and spoke of a resolution passed by the General Assembly last October calling for an end to the decades-long US embargo against Cuba.
This resolution provides the basis for the immediate lifting of illegal sanctions against Cuba and must be strictly implemented. China urges the United States to immediately end its blockade and any and all forms of coercion and pressure against Cuba, stop infringing upon the Cuban people's rights to life and development.
The debate in New York came a day after Cuba's national power grid collapsed, reportedly leaving 10 million people without electricity. According to Reuters, authorities are yet to explain the cause of the blackout. Mitch McCann, CGTN, at the UN in New York.
Escalating violence in Sudan is complicating an already dire situation. The country is the site of the world's largest displacement crisis, with millions forced from their homes. The Security Council received an update on the humanitarian issues in the country.
Children are being killed in their homes, they're being injured while fleeing violence, they're being caught in crossfire, shelling, drone strikes, and attacks using explosive weapons in populated areas. During the first 4 months of this year alone, nearly 80% of reported child casualties were linked to drone attacks.
Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
The Secretary General is deeply concerned by the latest violence between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which resulted in civilian casualties. He called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and the protection of civilians.
The UN is calling for diplomacy between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistani airstrikes in 3 provinces in Afghanistan resulted in more than 24 civilian deaths. The current Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo could trigger a development crisis. UNDP says the outbreak could cost up to $3.6 billion and hundreds of thousands of jobs if it spreads to more countries. A new report is pushing for more climate-resilient transport systems. Extreme heat is already melting train tracks and causing roads to buckle in some places. Experts say rising global temperatures are likely to disrupt transport systems from rails and roads to ports in the coming decades.
Coming up.
If we can set out good guidelines, if we can set out good safety standards, the world will be a better place because AI will be a safer technology to use.
UN Insider.
All you need to know about China. China 24, only on CGTN.
Canada is a founding member of the United Nations. I sat down with the country's ambassador, David Lametti. He shared his thoughts on AI, as well as his country's priorities at the UN. Ambassador Lametti, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Can you talk to us about some of the top priorities for Canada's UN mission right now?
Well, I think the first priority is the UN itself, and we're participating in UN reform. So the UN80 process, we're working with both UN officials and like-minded countries and the various branches of our government to try to make the UN a better functioning place. I mean, this is something that we take to heart. It's something we've advocated for a while, and certainly the current context makes it even more acute. So we're working. We've participated in the budget cuts that needed to happen. We have participated in the mandate review process, and now we're looking at institutions themselves and seeing where we can find better efficiencies in making the UN fit for purpose. Then hopefully we can tackle bigger questions like reform, the Security Council, and things like that. But that's I think something in the medium term. In terms of Canadian government priorities, obviously we are our long-standing commitment to humanitarian issues, respect for humanitarian law, peacekeeping and peace building, and really making development and trade things that the UN helps foster throughout the world. Finally, I would add one thing, which is a personal interest to me. The United Nations will have to play a role. It has begun to play a role, will have to continue to play a role in the governance of artificial intelligence and the setting up of safety rules for AI. We have, or suggested rules. I had some experience in that, both in government and in the private sector, and I hope to bring that experience to the UN.
You mentioned artificial intelligence. It's such a major topic, making headlines, involved in everyone's lives at the moment. You have some experience in that realm, and the UN is sort of taking a lead in figuring out the governance of it and where to begin, putting these panels together.
That's right.
What do you make of that effort? And can the UN actually get something done with this AI panel?
Well, I think it has to get something done. It's the only institution in the world where 193 countries who will be using artificial intelligence, who will be impacted by artificial intelligence, can sit down with the major companies who are developing the technology, who are promoting the technology, other organizations, NGOs, and expert panels and that sort of thing. So really this is the best convening space, the fairest convening space, the most inclusive convening space for all of that. The UN is a body that's complicated, but it is international in scope. We can use the scientific panels, we can use the global dialogue, we can use AI for good, various parts of the UN AI architecture that have already developed to put out standards. The UN is particularly good at developing standards. And this isn't a legislative body. We can't make rules for countries, but we can set standards, and then countries can develop and adopt those standards the way we've done over the years with the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, which has a fantastic record in the digital space, in the telecommunications space. And so if we could do that, if we can set out good guidelines, if we can set out good safety standards, the world will be a better place because AI will be a safer technology to use.
There's been so much talk over the decades about reforming the UN Security Council when it comes to representation and overhauling perhaps how it works. What are your thoughts there? What is Canada's view when it comes to Security Council reform?
Well, Canada's part of a group with Italy that traditionally, the United for Change group, that has been reluctant about adding either seats, permanent seats, or vetoes to the Security Council. That's our starting point. That being said, we recognize that the current structure of the Security Council was a compromise to make the UN work when it began in 1945. The world has evolved since then. The world has changed. Power relationships have changed. And the inability of the Security Council to act in a number of critical matters that have happened over the past number of decades tells us we need to change. And this may be a moment. Maybe this is the right moment to find compromise, a new necessary compromise that will make a new refounded Security Council function better. I'm committed to working to that. Canada's committed to working towards that goal. I'm not unrealistic. I understand how difficult change will be and the particular points of resistance that will exist within the Security Council to change. But this is a moment, and I think we have to seize it.
So much reform, a lot of budget cuts, a lot of structural reform. I mean, can more be done? Should more be done?
Yes, more should be done, and yes, more can be done. I think that we need to eliminate overlap and duplication. And probably the solution, to a large extent, is just better coordination between agencies, between the General Assembly, between the Security Council, and all the various component parts of the UN. There are ways in which, by coordinating, we protect the mandates that any particular agency has or the goals that it may have, but we also allow it to benefit from procurement or administrative support or administrative knowledge or know-how that another grouping within the UN might have. So better communication. It's not the first big institution I've been in where siloing has been a problem. I mean, I think the same was true of the Canadian government. It's something we fought against as ministers sitting around the cabinet table. So it's not unique to the UN, and so it's something that we need to do better. We can do better, and that will, I think, ultimately make it a much more effective place, better fit for purpose, and we can do more with less.
So, given everything that is happening in the world with this time of change, the conflicts, the outbreaks, the humanitarian issues, I mean, it seems worse than it's ever been. We're right now watching this UN Secretary General race unfold before us. What will that next leader require to move this body into the next 5, 10, 80 years?
The UN has always needed leadership, that's clear. And in particular now, as you've pointed out, there are a number of acute situations and crises in the world. We need a leader who is proactive, who will get out and mediate, get his or her hands dirty in conflicts and try to get to peaceful resolutions, whether they be temporary or permanent. We also need someone who will continue the process of change that Secretary General Guterres has started. And so there's a lot on the table, and it will take a truly, I think, a truly capable person. And I won't say extraordinary because I don't want to set the standard too high, but it will be a high standard. And so Canada is participating in discussions at the General Assembly level. We will participate fully in all of those conversations, and we will, I think, come forward at a certain point and express our view as to who the best placed person is. Of course, it's the Security Council that will propose it to the General Assembly. So in all cases, you're trying to influence the Security Council in their deliberations of who they put forward as the candidate to the General Assembly. But I do think there's a proactive role for countries in the General Assembly to make their views known as to the kind of candidate they want, the kind of leadership they want, and ultimately the candidate they want.
Speaking of candidates, there's been this push for a Madam Secretary General because there's never been a woman in 80 years. Is that time here?
Well, I certainly think so personally, and I know my government would like to see that. I think ultimately we want the best candidate, and it would be our preference that candidate be a woman, and it would, by convention, I believe it's widely held that person should come from Central or South America. Again, none of that is necessarily the case, and if there's an extraordinary candidate from wherever, I think we have a duty to consider that person. But all things being equal, I think we would like to see a woman, and all things being equal, we would like to see that woman come from Central or South America.
Ambassador Lametti, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
UN Insider.
They are often called the rainforests of the ocean. Coral reefs are home to hundreds of underwater species, but warming oceans are endangering reefs. Some scientists are now trying to find ways to make coral more resistant to environmental challenges.
Beneath the surface of the world's oceans, there are what you might call kingdoms, born more than 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. Most of us will never see these coral reef kingdoms up close, and our children might never have a chance to see them at all. For more than a quarter century, coral reefs have been dying. Environmentalist Ken Niedermeyer runs Reef Renewal in the Florida Keys.
I don't think we're going to get any breaks. I think this is a glimpse of the future. You know, people want to deny it and want to look the other way, but it's not going to get any better, not for the foreseeable future. And it's really got a lot of us, concerned about what is the future and can any of these corals survive, 98-degree water? I don't know. I don't think they can.
Oh, I think we've reached a tipping point.
Oh, really?
For coral reefs. I think definitely we've reached a tipping point, to the point where we have to bring corals into human care. We have to take care of these animals in a way that we couldn't do out on the reef.
Deborah Luke is Senior Vice President of Conservation at the Florida Aquarium.
I don't see a time right now, looking at the waters and how they're heating up and the rate that they're heating up, where they're going to go backwards and cool back down again. So if we want to keep corals and we want to keep reefs healthy and we want to thrive ourselves as a species, we have to protect coral reefs.
While there are many threats, right now the greatest single threat to the survival of the reefs is climate change-induced warming of the Earth's oceans. Is one of the primary, if not the primary, goal to find heat-resistant coral?
I think that is a goal, right? We need to look at that. We know that the waters are warming. We know that there's a lot of man-made influences that are affecting our waterways, right? Whether it be toxins, runoff, pollution, warming waters. We have to figure out all of those things. First thing we have to figure out is how to change human behavior to help with that. But in order to help the animals and the species that are there, we have to figure out ways that these corals can thrive in warmer waters.
During one stretch 2 years ago, waters off southern Florida topped 100 degrees. That's bathwater hot. Niedermeyer's team, along with other coral restoration groups, had spent years planting thousands of elkhorn corals grown in land-based nurseries around Florida, an effort to restore the struggling reef.
Between us and the rest of the practitioners down here, we had planted several 100,000 elkhorn coral.
What?
Yeah, and they were all gone.
Hundreds of thousands of them?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a staggering number.
It's a lot of effort, 10 years worth of work, and it was all gone in a week.
That happened in 2023, which turned out to be the beginning of the worst coral bleaching event on record. The color of coral comes from the algae living in them. When the water temperature gets extreme, the algae begin giving off a toxin. The corals react by expelling the algae, thus losing their color. Without the algae, the corals will die. That's coral bleaching.
The white,
yeah.
What is that?
So it's not bleaching, right?
No.
What this is actually where this coral is growing. So this is laying down calcium carbonate.
Carrie O'Neill is the senior scientist at the Florida Aquarium's Coral Conservation Program in Apollo Beach on the state's west coast.
Do you worry that maybe you can't save the reefs?
Coral reefs may never look like they did 50 or 100 years ago, but there's some sort of reef's going to be there. Like I said, there's a lot of resilient species. There are species that can be buried in sand for a month, and then the sand goes away, and they're like, hi, I'm alive. And they may be the only one left. But there are a lot of species out there that can adapt.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider.